The early morning wind swept through the valley, cold and sharp, carrying the bitter smell of dust and old blood. Elias Ward slowed his horse as the wooden gate of the cabin came into view. The land was supposed to be his fresh start, a quiet inheritance left behind by Uncle Jeremiah after the war. But what waited for him at the gate made his breath stop in his chest. 5 women hung from ropes. They were suspended in a silent row, swaying gently as the wind tugged at their torn dresses. Their hair fell over their faces, hiding their eyes. Bare feet dangled just above the frozen ground, moving slowly like the hands of a broken clock. Nailed to each chest was a rough wooden sign. The words were burned deep into the wood, sharp and ugly in the pale morning light. "This ain't your land. What belongs to Morrison will always belong to Morrison." Elias tightened his grip on the reins, his throat going dry. This land had been left to him fair and clear, a place to breathe again after years of gunfire and screams. But instead of peace, he found a warning written in flesh and rope. His horse snorted and shifted beneath him, sensing the danger. Elias slid down from the saddle, his boots crunching against the hard ground. He walked closer, every step heavy, his heart pounding louder with each one. The women looked lifeless, their necks bent at cruel angles, skin bruised dark beneath the ropes. He reached out, his rough hand shaking as his fingers touched the throat of the nearest woman. A pulse answered. Him, weak, faint. But there, Elias sucked. In a sharp breath, he checked another, then another. All 5 were still alive, barely clinging to breath in the cold morning air. Something hot and fierce lit inside his chest. This was no longer about land or inheritance. This was a challenge. A threat meant to scare him away or kill him slow. Elias drew his knife. The blade caught the light as he sliced through the first rope. The woman dropped, but he caught her just before she hit the ground. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her neck raw and red from the noose. He lowered her gently, then moved fast, cutting rope after rope, refusing to stop until all 5 lay on the ground. Their bodies were ice cold. Bruises covered their wrists and ankles where they had been bound. Dark marks crossed their backs and arms, proof of long hours of pain. Whoever had done this wanted them to suffer, wanted them to be seen. Elias dragged them under the cabin awning, then inside the dark, dusty room. He struck a match and built a fire, the yellow light slowly filling the space. One by one, their faces came into view. One had black hair and sharp features, even in pain. A deep cut marked her cheek like a badge of defiance. Another had red hair and cracked lips, her posture still proud despite her injuries. A third was slender, blonde, her face gentle and worn with grief. The fourth lay quiet and watchful, dark, eyes half open, studying everything. The last was older, her presence calm, steady, like someone used to protecting others. Elias poured water into their mouths, slow and careful. He tore cloth for bandages, his hands steady now, his mind clear. Outside, the wind howled against the cabin walls. Carrying the smell of rope and smoke, he sat with his back to the door, his rifle across his lap. Memories of war flickered behind his eyes. Battles he had hoped were long buried. Uncle Jeremiah's words echoed in his mind. Land is not just bought with money. It is held with blood. The silence broke when the black-haired woman opened her eyes. Her voice was rough, but strong. "Do not leave us." Elias knelt beside her and helped her drink again. When she could breathe easier, she looked straight at him, her gaze sharp and knowing. "You realize cutting those ropes means war," she said. Groans filled the room as the others slowly woke. The red-haired woman pushed herself up, anger burning bright in her eyes. The blonde clutched Elias's shirt without meaning to, desperate for something solid. The older woman moved among them, steadying hands, whispering calm words. At last, the older woman spoke, her voice low and firm. "We were hung as a message. The man who runs this land now wanted you to see what happens to those who resist him." The red-haired woman gave a bitter laugh. "If you are smart, you will leave now. We are already dead. If you shelter us, you will be too." Elias looked at them, one by one. 5 women who had been left to die because they knew something dangerous. He stood slowly, his voice quiet but unshakable. "I cut the ropes. From that moment on, your fate is tied to mine." The black-haired woman let out a tired smile. "Then listen well, rancher. You did not just inherit a cabin. You inherited a war." Outside, the wind howled louder, and in the distance, the faint sound of hooves echoed across the valley. By midday, the fog had burned away, leaving the valley exposed and silent. Elias stood outside the cabin, eyes scanning the tree line, listening to every sound. The land looked peaceful, but he knew better. Peace in the West was often just the quiet before blood spilled. Inside the cabin, the women rested on blankets near the fire. Their strength was returning slowly, but their eyes never stopped moving. Each of them listened the way hunted people listen, always ready to run or fight. The older woman, Grace, was the first to rise. She moved stiffly, pain etched into every step, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "The man who did this is Judge Morrison. He controls the town, the sheriff, the courts. People disappear when they speak against him." Elias leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his face hard. He had heard the name before during the war. A man who wore law-like armor and used it to crush anyone beneath him. Ruby, the red-haired woman, spat into the dirt. "He burned my house and blamed my father for debts that never existed. When I refused to sign, they took me in the night." Sadi, the blonde, held her knees close to her chest. "They said my father stole horses. They took me as payment. He was dead by morning." Violet said nothing at first. She waited until Elias looked her way. Then she reached into her coat and pulled out a small leather pouch. She opened it slowly, spilling papers onto the floor: land deeds, contracts, letters stamped with seals. "Proof," she said quietly. "Morrison's crimes, trafficking, bribes. Names of men he owns." The fire popped loudly. Elias crouched down and picked up one of the documents. His jaw tightened. "This is why he tried to kill you." Clarabelle, the black-haired woman, nodded. "He thought hanging us would erase the truth. He did not expect you." Outside, a horse whinnied in the distance. Elias stood quickly and stepped onto the porch. 3 riders appeared on the far ridge, black against the sky. They did not move closer. They only watched. Clarabelle joined him, her rope-marked neck bare to the wind. "Scouts," she said. "He knows we lived." That night, Elias barred the doors and windows. He checked his rifle, then another, laying weapons on the table. He handed them out without hesitation. Ruby took a revolver with shaking hands, then steadied herself. "I won't run again." Sadi swallowed hard but accepted a shotgun. "I won't either." Violet tested the weight of a knife and hid it beneath her sleeve. Grace loaded an old musket, her movements calm, practiced. Clarabelle took the final pistol and met Elias's eyes. "You still have time to leave." Elias shook his head. "If I ride now, I live with this forever." "I won't." The sound of hooves rolled in just after sunset. Not 3 this time. Dozens torches lit the dark like crawling fire. Men laughed as they circled the cabin, their voices thick with cruelty. A figure rode forward. Tall, calm, confident, Morrison. His voice carried his "Lee, hand them over." "Ward, That land was never yours. Elias stepped onto the porch. Rifle in hand, it is now. A gunshot cracked the night, splintering wood beside Elias's head. He dove back inside as bullets tore through the walls. The cabin exploded with noise and fire. Ruby fired first, dropping a man as he charged the porch. Sadi screamed but pulled the trigger, the blast knocking to riders from their saddles. Violet moved like a shadow, striking fast when a man forced his way through the door. Flames roared as Grace hurled burning oil into the yard. Horses panicked. Men shouted. Elias worked the rifle like a machine. Each shot found its mark. Clarabelle stood beside him, fearless, firing until smoke wrapped around her like a veil. The fight felt endless, but slowly the gunfire faded. Bodies littered the ground. The attackers pulled back, wounded and shocked. Then Morrison stepped forward again, revolver gleaming. "You think you won," he sneered. "Law is still mine." Clarabelle stepped out, holding the papers high. "Not anymore." Violet raised a silver locket. "Your wife lives," she spoke. "The truth is already riding to the marshal for the first time." Fear cracked Morrison's face. He raised his gun. Elias moved faster. 2 shots rang out. Morrison fell to his knees, screaming in pain, his weapon sliding into the dirt. Moments later, hoofbeats thundered again. This time, badges shone in the firelight. The marshal dismounted, eyes taking in the scene. "It's over," he said. As Morrison was dragged away, silence settled over the valley. Elias lowered his rifle, blood seeping from his shoulder, breath heavy. Clarabelle looked at him, her voice soft but sure. "You saved us." Elias stared at the burning torches dying in the dirt. "No," he said, "we saved each other." The valley was quiet again by morning, the kind of quiet that comes only after violence has burned itself out. Smoke drifted low over the ground, and the smell of gunpowder still clung to the air. Elias sat on the porch step, his wounded shoulder wrapped tight, watching the sun rise over land that no longer felt cursed. Inside the cabin, the women moved slowly, helping one another as if they had done so all their lives. They were bruised and tired, but something had changed. Fear no longer ruled their eyes. By noon, Marshal Thompson returned with 2 deputies. Morrison was bound in chains, his once clean coat stained with dust and shame. The marshal read the charges aloud, his voice steady and clear. Trafficking, murder, forgery, bribery, each word fell heavier than the last. Clarabelle stepped forward and placed the papers into the marshal's hands. "These belong to the truth," she said. Morrison glared at Elias as he was led away, hatred burning in his eyes, but his power was gone. He was just a man now, stripped of fear and lies. When the riders disappeared down the trail, the land felt different. Lighter days passed. The women stayed. No one spoke about leaving. Grace took charge without asking. She cleaned the cabin, organized the supplies, and kept order like a mother guarding her children. Ruby healed fast, her anger turning into strength as she worked the horses and repaired the fence. Sadi planted seeds near the porch, her hands shaking but determined to make something grow again. Violet spent hours sorting papers, sending copies to the courts, making sure Morrison's reach ended for good. Clarabelle stayed close to Elias, silent and watchful, like a flame that never went out. Elias rebuilt the gate where the ropes once hung. He burned the wood that had held the nooses and scattered the ashes across the field. No warnings would stand there again. One night they sat around the fire, the cabin warm and steady. The wind whispered outside, but it no longer carried fear. "Some ropes are meant to kill," Elias said quietly. "But when you cut them, they can turn into something else." Clarabelle placed her hand over his. We are still here because you did not look away. Elias looked around the room, at faces once marked for death, at people who now felt like family. I thought I inherited land, he said, but I inherited all of you. No one spoke. They did not need to. Outside, the stars stretched wide across the sky. The cabin stood strong beneath them, no longer a place of terror, but a refuge built by those who refuse to be broken in the Wild West. Land can be stolen, and power can lie. But justice belongs to those who stand together when it matters most. And sometimes the greatest inheritance is not land at all, but the courage to become someone better. The fire burned low as the night carried them into sleep, safe at last.